I'm a man that can admit to doing mistakes in his life. Well, some of them. And that being said, the biggest mistake I probably made on this channel was when I did a video titled, Which Gundam is the Strongest? Now that video was definitely too short and simplistic to cover a topic so wide and vast. I ended up making a minor fault in the sense that I accidentally made a video about which Gundam I liked moreover than which Gundam was the strongest, based on factual information. Now I did change the title to reflect that, regardless of what the comments say, but still, I can admit when I am at fault for something. That being said, the idea did come to mind. Maybe I could make a video about something like this, but to do that I was going to need far more information than what I was displaying for every 2-minute segment for every Gundam I was putting in that list. As well as have to dedicate some time to understanding and everything the Gundams I've been talking about. After all, I've watched Gundam since I was quite actually 4, so I'm pretty sure I knew what I was talking about to some extent. Maybe I just didn't present it the right way. So, all I need is sufficient amounts of time, some information, and to dedicate maybe one episode to one Gundam. That way I have a basis for my claims. That being said, I decided, in the wake of that I would make a new series. Hello everyone, how many of you out there enjoy mecha or mech anime? Enjoy mech commentary? Enjoy robots of any type? Yes, even those. Well, this is going to be a series called MechaWorks that I'm going to be starting on my channel. Every week to 2 weeks, I will be showcasing a mech of my choosing, namely from different animes or manga series I have come accustomed to liking or accustomed with, and I will be rating them based on various categories that I have listed below, all of them evening out to a final score of 10. Now undoubtedly you will notice that a lot of the things on my list right now or of my interest are going to be namely things of the Gundam series, mainly because I frequently watch the Gundam series, like the Gundam series, and also seems to be where most people want to see stuff and talk about things in. But that does not mean the series will be only dedicated towards Gundam. It is called MechaWorks for a reason. Mecha implying that any and all mecha can be included into the series. I would just need to watch the source material or read it to actually be able to make some type of commentary on it. And seeing as how I haven't done that for a lot of other mangas and anime, I am going to need some time to do that. So, don't be surprised if some things that aren't Gundam related aren't on this list for a while. But that being said, this is MechaWorks. I've always loved the Freedom Gundam, and by extension the Gundam Seed series. Now, before everyone rolls their eyes in the Gundam community, oh here we go, another Jesus Yamato person. No, that's not why I enjoy the series. In fact, that's probably one of the more low points of the series. And I am not above saying that the series is definitely not the pleasure child of the family. See, Gundam Seed is one of those things I would say definitely can fall under a guilty pleasure type of experience. But I also don't think it is inherently horrible too. I've heard a lot of people say that Gundam Seed is the trash of Gundam and it's the worst Gundam, albeit I have definitely seen worse Gundam series. Namely, things like G-Fighter and things like that, which I don't even know why that needs to exist. But still, this isn't supposed to be a commentary on Gundam Seed. So that being said, I'd like everyone to please understand that this is not necessarily about the series, moreover as the pilot in question of the series. Air pilots, because this isn't going to be the only episode dedicated to a Gundam Seed pilot. I've always liked the main Gundam of the series, the Freedom. It's got blue wings, it's a Gundam, and it is, or by far, one of the more popular ones you see around the various Gundam anime series. That being said, however, let's see if it actually can go up to snuff in this rating we put here. The pilot in question is a boy named Kira Yamato. Say what you want about him being somewhat preachy or whiny, although I would argue he's by far not the worst one we've had in the Gundam protagonist section. He's got a stellar combat record. Now, for the sake of my own sanity, I'm not going to include any of Kira's Jesus Yamato moments, as many people call them, because if I did, I'd turn this whole comment section into a cult congregation of the Jesus Yamato followers and the hate Seed followers. So let's try to avoid getting that worse, because it's already going to be probably bad as is with the hate. I'm also going to be considering his performance only in the first series, named Gundam Seed. Mainly because I feel like there's enough change between the two series to facilitate this. And if I do a video on the Strike, Freedom, and Destiny and Infinite Justice in some time, you'll definitely see what I mean by that stark contrast and change. Mainly in the sense of like overall power, which is a good and bad thing, but that's a story for another day. Kira is what you call a coordinator, or coordinator as they say in English. An advanced genetic species of human, or basically a designer baby. In this world, there is currently a battle going on between what is known as naturals, or normal humans, and coordinators, which are, like I said, Kira, heightened, enhanced humans, basically. And during this series, Kira goes from being a simple 17-year-old, 18-year-old civilian to a pilot in the Earth Forces, which are the natural faction. Yes, it's going to sound weird if you haven't seen the series. I would advise watching it at least once, even if you do not like it, to substantially cheating death, and eventually receiving the main Gundam in the series, the Freedom, which is what this video is about. Now, before this, Kira was fighting in a unit called the Strike Gundam, and although I'm not going to be really talking about Kira in this sense of fighting with the Strike, I will mention, for the sake of this commentary and this rating for pilot, he did fight many times at a number disadvantage, sometimes even against other Gundams as well, and I'm talking about multiple Dual, Blitz, and Aegis Gundams. He also has the ability known as the Seed, which greatly enhances and heightens all senses in a moment of great peril, or later, I guess, whenever you want to, apparently. I don't know. That being said, there's a few instances of him struggling, rather it be distraction or feelings. This isn't an inherently bad thing also. The thought that feelings or emotions during a battle is a bad thing. However, it is very distracting, and it also shows on his character that he is very easily and susceptible to it, especially, it seems, in combat. Now, understandably so, he is a civilian and was not brought up to have a more soldier-esque mentality, which I think a lot of people forget. However, it is still very distracting and annoying many times, and I'm not going to act like it isn't. It is shown many times that he has suffered for this. Either way, however, he is a strong pilot overall, and is able to prioritize destroying other machines without hitting the chest or cockpit where the enemy combatant would be sitting, which, however you feel about it, you still have to admit is very skillful fighting to prioritize those sections without hitting anyone. Didn't say hurting, because there's definitely times when you could say someone pretty much would be effed up if, you know, their head on their mobile suit exploded and shrapnel shred in. Which actually brings me to another question of how many of the people die accidentally that he shoots down. But that's another commentary for another day. With that being said, let's give him a rating of 1.8 out of 2. Now that that's out of the way, let's begin with the unit itself, the Freedom Gundam, the main Gundam of Gundam Seed. The Freedom Gundam was created by Zaf's military, the enemy military in this conflict from the Earth Forces. The Freedom is part of the ZGM-FX series, which, although many of you are probably not even going to care or know about, is the main series for Zaf's development of the experimental Gundam type units, developed from the Dual, Buster, and Aegis from earlier that were captured from Earth Forces. Once again, you're not going to know that unless you watch the series. Continuing on, the Freedom was what they came up with after combining all of the units' attributes and a couple test mobile suits attributes that did not appear in the original Gundam Seed anime, but are in the manga. So if you're curious about that, read the manga. The key thing about the Freedom, and undoubtedly is the main allure of it, is its speed. The Freedom Gundam is equipped with 2 wings, which have thrusters in it, definitely idolize that feeling of extreme speed and mobility in the air and space. Ironically, this unit was built in space, and seems like even though they gave it wings, it would be redundant in space. It does seem to utilize these features in space rather well. As you can see on the sides of the wings, there are 2 small holes, or line holes, that actually admit thrust so that it can fly and maneuver using the wings. So they're not actually just for show, they actually do stuff. And I believe also stabilize the unit. All in all, this unit's capabilities extend to that in the air and space. This isn't really a ground unit, obviously the wings. However, it isn't horrible on the ground either. It's got legs, it's got a human, basically physiology, so it's going to be rather useful on the ground, but definitely not more of a ground type than some of the other units that are in this series. For example, the Buster or even the Launcher Strike. But either way, it is a very multi-purpose unit. It is actually considered to be a high mat or a high mobility aerial tactics unit. And although the unit weighs about 71.5 tons, it actually has a total thrust of about 527,000 kilograms, which is effectively like lifting about 2.5 to 3 rocket or space shuttles we have about now, or the equivalent of lifting about 716.4 soccer moms. And sadly, I would not be lying if I told you that I got more satisfaction out of doing this calculation than I did my entire trigonometry class. Overall, I would have to say this thing's mobility is some of the best you are going to get in Gundam, and that's definitely because of the main thruster backpack, which is the wings. And though it does have thrusters on the sides of its shoulders and on the bottom of the rail cannons, which we'll get to later, dodging and everything else, of course, those are going to be a significant factor, even though they aren't really used in the series. It also requires an extremely skilled pilot to master this thing, quoting that its high performance is resulted from its complicated control system that demands extremely fast reaction speed and spatial awareness from its pilot. So it's also not just the unit. Let's give this thing a final rating on mobility. For mobility's sake, this speed demon is going to get a 1.5 out of 2. The reason why I don't give it a 2, as I was seen to be hawking this thing up to be great, like I said, it's not all purpose exactly. It is very exceptional when it comes to space combat and air combat. However, most comparably to other ground units or places where it could not utilize those features, for example, which, let's be honest, isn't going to be much places unless you're underground or buried on something, it's not going to excel in. Even though it does have the capabilities to still utilize the terrain of Earth and things like that, it's still not going to perform the best in those types of environments. And undoubtedly it will show it. But because of the thing's overall raw speed and performance, I would have to say this thing gets a couple bonus points just because of that. Now, when I was considering the overall output and damage of the weapons on the Freedom, or any mobile suit for that matter, I had to take in consideration a couple things. See, the first thing is, are there any different options on how to fire the weapon? Can the weapon be used in conjunction with something else? For example, in 00, the Throne unit can link up to one of the other units and use the main cannon on its back in a very different, more powerful way. Now, the Freedom for the most part doesn't have that, unless you count the Meteor, which I will be counting in a later section, but for now we're not going to worry about it. So that wasn't that difficult. But the weapons it does have do have various different firing modes. Beginning with the wings, which I'm sure everyone's eyes have been drawn to, those beautiful, beautiful things. The Balena plasma beam cannons. And sorry if I butcher words here, although I hear it's common that Americans do that. A pair of powerful beam cannons located on the wings, almost similar to that of the Gundam XX. They are used to fire these huge heavy red beams that you will see many times fired from the Freedom's full burst unit mode, which, once again, we'll talk about later. The plasma beams can be used in conjunction with each other or separately, as seen multiple times in the anime, as well as being able to fire in burst or in long stretches of pure beam. Insert your innuendo joke here. Unlike that, however, is that of the rail cannons on its waist. The rail cannons, knownly called the M15 Sigfus rail cannons, are pale red cannons mounted on the waist. An excellent firing rate, ammunition capacity. Yes, these are not necessarily a beam that's charged, but more of something that is loaded in the unit and then fired at an extreme rate of speed, if you're not familiar with what a rail cannon is. And they are folded into 3 parts that extend out to be fired into a long rail cannon. Now, these are especially useful for any time that the unit needs to fight something that has some type of beam protection, where the top weapons, the beam cannons, will not be useful. So basically that super specific instance when the Freedom was fighting the Forbidden. These effectively act as physical damage weapons, which, although we'll get into later with phase shift armor, aren't as effective. These definitely pack greater punch than missiles or normal bullets would. And although they are foldable, they are very long, you'll see, when stretched out, which is something that's rectified later in another series. They don't tend to show too much of a problem with their length. Again, I'm probably not helping myself with the way I'm saying this stuff, but still. Other than that, we have the CIWS cannons on the chest and head, although only the head ones are used in the anime. I believe the chest ones are used in the manga somewhere, but still. And the Lupus beam rifle. Or sorry, I think it's Lupus beam rifle. English isn't my maiden language. Either way, it's a high energy beam rifle that's used as its main way to fire at smaller targets or other targets instead of wasting energy using the heavier cannons unless in the full burst mode. And as well as a pair of Laceretta beam sabers, which are used in close combat, which although you only see two, they are able to combine into what's known as a ambidextrous halberd mode, which I generally call the how have I not cut my fucking self mode. Kira rarely use this. Either way, it still should be considered, or what you see generally be just as used. And the two beam sabers are stored on the rail cannons on the side. And although it only has two swords, it is shown multiple times that it excels extremely using these two swords in melee combat. That being said, all of these weapons can be used in conjunction with each other than the swords of course, in something known as the full burst mode, which is basically like firing all the guns at the same time. Which is not necessarily something unique to Gundams in general. I mean, obviously, some Gundams don't even have this quote-unquote full burst mode. They can just fire their guns at the same time. But still, it seems to be some signifying factor that they're used in a better way with the quote-unquote multi-lock-on system. Which basically is when the screen pops up on the unit and it locks onto all the targets in front of it and just fires out at them. Noting that all of these generally aren't hitting cockpits. I say generally because we've never really seen it, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a hit or miss somewhere. All I'm saying is someone didn't make it. Anyway, calculating all of these weapons and the multi-lock system in full burst mode, which will be included somewhere else later, I'm going to give this thing an overall weapons rating of a 1.5. Now, the reason why I don't give it a higher rating in this sense is even though it excels in close combat with the two blades, or moreover that's where the pilot comes in, it still comes into question that the overall melee utility of the unit. Now, albeit melee combat is not necessarily a focus in these types of fights or mock battles, or depending on the fight shouldn't be, it still is something that should be accounted in when considering the overall weapons rating of a unit. Just because you haven't had to use more melee weapons in a fight does not mean you shouldn't have the accessibility to use them. But the reason why I get such a high rating either way is because of the fact that it has all those weapons on it. Defensive capabilities. They're to help you when you get stabbed through the chest and you have a nuclear cartridge in your stomach. Wait, what? The Freedom has multiple types of defensive equipment. One is known as the phase shift armor, which I'm going to get through first because that's going to be the bulk of this defensive part. Now, for the sake of this, we only need to worry about one type of phase shift armor. There is two, VPS and PS. We only need to worry about PS because that is the pre-form of VPS. If you really need to know, VPS stands for Varial Phase Shift Armor, which means if you come to a fight ill-prepared and get punched in the jaw, you can come back this time with a helmet on and still get punched in the jaw. Not much change other than you're wearing a helmet now. War as hell. And effectively, it acts as a sort of anti-physical shield. So things like bombs, missiles, machine guns, and knives, or physical blades. Now, phase shift armor is persistent the majority of the Gundams throughout Gundam Seed. In fact, I think pretty much all of them have it. I can't actually think of one that doesn't have phase shift armor. Even the Destroy, which is ironic because it's a giant mobile. Anyway, phase shift armor was created by using electricity to reduce damage of all physical attacks. Phase shift armor effectively changes the color when the unit starts up and acts as a sort of like coating that protects it from all that stuff. And actually including beams, but not to the extreme extent you're thinking. However, using this armor does drain the suit significantly, to the point where it always generally needed to be charged after a short time in battle. Not to mention, even though phase shift armor can protect you against physical attacks, it was never an indefinite thing, it seemed, because of the fact that it could only take about 76 hits from a normal missile from one of the units called a Baku, which is effectively like a dog that carries missiles. I know, weird, it's Gundam, just go with it. Now, In this sense, for the Freedom at least, the phase shift armor problem of power output was basically rectified since the Freedom here, and I'm not playing with you, is equipped with something called an in-jammer canceller, which effectively is a nuclear cartridge stored in the abdomen of the unit, or back depending, which gives this thing far greater output than you would see in normal mobile suits. So yes, is effectively sitting on a nuclear reactor when he pilots this thing, which you would think would make him sterile, but they never really touch on that, so I don't know. Either way, this effectively allows phase shift armor to never have to be recharged on that unit. So it's effectively up any time, unless this unit goes and cuts off, of course, which obviously you do in storage and anything like that. Other than that, during battle, it's pretty much always on. Now, even though it can protect against physical attacks, the majority of things in this series are all beam attacks, or especially towards the end of each series are beam attacks. So phase shift armor can protect against those, but it's not that well, and after a couple of hits from it, or some pretty key target points, you can pretty easily break through or blow up something that does have phase shift armor. Outside of phase shift armor, the unit is also equipped with an anti-beam shield, which, if you're facing something with a beam, and you are very weak to beams, it'll be far better. Now, ironically, holding a physical shield you would think would inhibit or inherit, well, the way it's designed, I assume, allows it to basically maneuver easier with the shield. This isn't really going to be a large section, considering that this unit doesn't have the most interesting shield utility. Although, to be fair, phase shift armor is cool, DPS is a little bit more interesting, and we'll get into when we get into Sea Destiny at some point. But for right now, I'm going to give those two things a rating 1.3. Now, the reason I don't give it any higher than that is basically phase shift armor is good, and even though the Freedom basically never has to recharge the phase shift armor, or at least doesn't have to for an extremely long period of time, one that would be completely unfeasible to stay in fighting, it effectively still can get destroyed and damaged by beam weapons. Now, physical, barely any will ever destroy it, unless it's like a physical, ball and chain, but most beam weapons can penetrate it after so many hits, as shown by the fights when it fights other Gundams. That being said, this is not saying that phase shift armor is weak, nor is it saying that the shield's not useful, just that those are the only two defensive attributes it has, and it could have some better ones, i.e. maybe a positron shield. Wrapping up with the final section, we're going to be talking about the special capabilities of this unit, and this is going to be the section for a lot of units that very much make or break the unit. Sometimes that might be both in the positive sense. The Freedom has access to two very important things: Meteor unit and the HIMAT system. Now, beginning with the Meteor system is a auxiliary unit that actually flies off of one of the ships that is used to carry the Freedom, the Eternal, and basically acts as a mini mobile armor that attaches to the unit and adds a whole bunch of more weapons and wide variety of attacks, including missiles, more beams, and two things that actually seem like they're more beam cannons, but also can act as beam sabers. I don't know, they're really freaking cool, and I really wish I had a model of one. And that definitely is going to give this unit a huge edge in the special capabilities category. And I know it's technically not part of the unit, but considering how much it uses the Meteor, it pretty much should be like it. I'm going to do it for every unit or mobile suit that has a mobile armor attachment, so it's not like I'm taking favoritism here. They are part of the special capabilities. The other part, the HIMAT system. Now, I said earlier that the HIMAT is a high mobility aerial type of thing. Well, not only is that the type of unit it is, but that's also the name of the system, which basically allows when the wings to open for the unit to get extreme amounts of mobility in terms of speed and things like that. Remember, like I said, this thing is fast. I mean, just look at this thing. That being said, it's still not the strongest form that you will see of this type of advanced mobility system, but it's still very good, so it's definitely going to add another 0.4 to what I currently have as 1 point, as I currently have as 1. Then we have the nuclear jammer canceller, or neutron jammer canceller, which is effectively the generator for the unit. And generally I wouldn't rate this, considering it's just the power source of the unit, but it is a nuclear battery that is shoved into this thing, which definitely is going to improve its overall output. I mean, if we're just talking about raw power here, 8,000 and 826 kilowatts output. So yeah, this thing's a powerhouse as well. That being said, I'm going to basically give this thing a special capabilities rating of a 1.9. Now this generally isn't out of anything, and in fact it's where the unit can kind of get back any points it's lost, but because I want this thing to be a flat 10 for mathematical sense, I want this to be out of 2. However, for future reference to anybody watching, this can sometimes have something that goes up past 2 in a way if it has enough capabilities. With all that being calculated, we have a 1.8 for the pilot section, a 1.5 for the weapon section, a 1.5 for the mobility section, a 1.3 for the defensive section, and a 1.9 for the special capability section, leading us to a final score of an 8. The Freedom Gundam is definitely powerful, it's strong and everything, and I definitely feel like it deserves to be in this category. Now even though I love it, I would have to give it another 0.5, but that's just my personal rating, and that's more of just aesthetically adding stuff to. But honestly, it's an 8. It's a very well-rounded, good mobile suit, and it definitely shows its prowess in the Gundam Seed series. That being said, this is Destiny Dragon God. I hope you all enjoyed. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the content or commentary and want to see more. Don't forget to comment down below and tell me what mobile suit you might want to see next, Gundam or otherwise. And don't forget to subscribe too, to stay posted on more MechaWorks and other games and anime. I will see you guys next time.